how about we move over to the news?
The news it is.
South American, all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press.
News. We have not one, but two 4X games to talk about today. So let's get right to it. The first one is something that's going to be coming out in 2022, and they're getting ready to kickstart it, but it is not on Kickstarter yet. It is called Fractal Beyond the Void. BoardGameInc.com has a pretty good makeup of what the game is, and it looks pretty interesting. First thing we should say is that we're not really 4X people per se, the Game Brain crew, right? It's not. We're not totally against
Eclipse is where I think our intersection is, where
yes,
we'll play Eclipse, and it's so interesting to me on how so much of my lens is basically when I look at a 4X, I go like, how does this compare to Eclipse? And that's my filter, which maybe for right or wrong, that just happens to be.
Twilight Imperium 4, TI4 is another one of those games that you could say, all right, why would I want to play a 4X when I could play TI4? That is another one. I'm just joking. There's a bunch. I hate TI4. I don't like it at all. But their friend Candace, a friend of the pod, loves TI4, and she's got some really good taste. So I'm not sure that my opinion of TI4 is correct, and if it's not, I'm not sure what I missed. I think it's because I owned TI3, and it was such a bad experience that maybe I didn't give TI4 enough of a chance. But yeah, I think that's the question. The question, Paul, is why do we want another 4X game? If we have Eclipse, if you're on that side of the coin, or TI4 on the other side of the coin, what is this going to bring to the table that is really going to break it out? And for the world of Fractal, for Fractal Beyond the Void, it's the same 4X. For people that don't know 4X, we'll just quickly give them to you. They stand for Explore, Exploit, Expand, and Exterminate. So it is sort of empire building on a map, essentially, is what it is, right? You're going to explore the map and reveal new tiles and so on and so forth on the map. You're going to take over, in the case of these Space 4Xs, you're going to take over new planetary systems and so on and so forth, and increase your economic military might and so on and so forth. Expand is going to be building colonies and so on and so forth out in space. And Exterminate, of course, is build big shiny ships and roll a whole bunch of dice and crash them into each other until you dominate your opponent. So that's what it is. One of the things about this game is that it does seem to have a story mode to some degree, which is something that TI4 and Eclipse do not have. First of all, a lot of these 4Xs have unique factions. In this case, they did something interesting with the factions. In both of the other games, both TI4 and Eclipse, your faction, you get it, and this is your faction, and this is what you play. In this case, there are three different things that make up what makes you unique, right? There is the faction itself, which has an innate ability. There is a combat aspect to it, and there's a political philosophy, and these things are somewhat different and disparate. Don't know enough about it to comment, other than to say that from a design perspective, if you are designing a race or a player power that has three different aspects, that could be a step up. That could be something where you're making more differences and more nuances between players than normal, right?
I think so. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, my first go-to is, well, balance. If the moment you start adjusting that, then now you risk there being a certain setting that is optimal for whatever. I don't know if this is the case. That's just where my mind first goes to. And so, it'd be interesting to see how they've considered that.
Yeah, well, one thing is that they are putting 12 races in the box, so 12 different things. So even if a few of them are unbalanced, you still have plenty of game to play with the remaining. So I think that's helpful. But then the other thing is the story aspect, which is they have the Aftermath, which is a story-driven, dynamic campaign that represents the changing state of the galaxy through various gaming sessions. And the idea of playing a 4X game continually, serially, as a campaign is very interesting to me. I think these games tend to not be the shortest games in the world. They tend to take some time to play. So there is a risk in extending that out to multiple gaming sessions that you might wear out your welcome. But there's also the possibility that, people that like 4X games tend to tolerate longer playing sessions to begin with. They might be exactly the type of people that might be into an evolving campaign. So that's Fractal Beyond the Void. I think we should keep an eye on it and check it out as it develops. And then the second one, you probably have heard something about it. Stellaris: Infinite Legacy. Stellaris is a very popular PC game. I've actually played it on my son's computer a little bit. I like it.
Wow, look at that.
I have played a video game.
You have played one video game.
I have played one video game. My son is obsessed, like Trey is, with Valheim. So
Sure.
So these things happen. But yeah, I like Stellaris. I thought that was a very good video game, and the PC game looks pretty darn good. And because of that, it is crushing Kickstarter right now. It is absolutely crushing Kickstarter. I believe the end of the campaign is around April 5th or April 6th. So when you hear this, if you want to get in on it, you're going to have to jump in and check it out quickly. It is at $2.3 million, I think, is where they are on the Kickstarter. So it is absolutely crushing it. And what can we tell you about Stellaris? Well, first of all, it is based on a video game, which gives me a little bit of breathing room, right? I'm not worried about, did they mess it up, right? They have a good base to build off of no matter what. They have, it is a 4X game in which you are designing a civilization, and they say that you can play this in 2 hours. That would be quite something. When you think, I mean, could you imagine an actual 4X game that our group can play in 2 hours?
No. No, that's not something that is possible.
We are slow, aren't we?
I think for all of it, we are heavy on the thought process.
Yeah.
So slow is a perception, right? Like, I think if you were to measure out, like BGA is very good at this, like how much time an individual takes versus how much time it feels like an individual takes. I think you'll find that like there is a discrepancy. I tend to be a pretty mid to long thinker. I've been told by certain people in our group that I'm not. It doesn't feel that way. By the way I play, because I'm always like narrating my thoughts and like blah 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 blah. But like I tend to be a longer thinker compared to say everyone compared to Alfred. But like
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
I mean, you hide that well. You hide the fact that you actually think about the game you're playing. It's really nice.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's always lovely to be seen.
Another thing about Stellaris is that it's kind of almost a campaign game as well, in the sense that when you are done with an empire that you've been building, abandoned empires remain in the galaxy as fallen empires, right? And you can. People can jump into the game that you're playing and join in and so on and so forth. Kind of has an emergent story aspect to it. Yeah, this is a very interesting game. The problem comes with the price point. So the base level game is $110. The Deluxeified, and I don't even know if it's Deluxeified. All it means is, with Kickstarter, there are all the additional levels and all the add-ons that are in there. If you want all the add-ons, you're looking at $170 for this game. That's a price point. Let's just say that, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like, if this is something, I mean, obviously at 2 million, like, it's going to be fine. It's doing fine, right? Like, and I think
we don't have to worry about, oh, are we damaging the game? No, they're fine.
Yeah. I think in the end, like, people pick what they want to do, like, and if this is that game that, like, it means so much to people, like, they have a lot of great memories about it, and like they I think 2.7, like, I remember days when a PS2 was like $300, and people were talking about, is this too much for a console? Is this too much for something like that as a luxury item? And time and time again, the answer is no. People are going to pay what they're going to pay to have that dopamine hit. And I think that, like, I think this is actually really great pricing from a business standpoint.
Maybe.
I think people are
maybe. I guess the question is how many times do you need to commit to getting this to the table to justify the price point, right?
Yeah. I think we're a bunch of nerds that way, Tom. I don't know if people really think in those terms. I don't know. I like we're like, as a group, we tend to go like, here is cost analysis. Here is like money. I remember this. I remember this time. Like, what we do is we have dinner before game night often, and Trey and I were in line at this Brazilian kind of.
The one down the street from me?
Exactly. The steakhouse, not like Brazilian.
Churrasco, right?
Yeah, it's like a buffet kind of thing, where you just basically put stuff on your plate, you weigh it, and then you pay. And being who we are, good or bad, hold on a second.
Is this where you were looking at the person in front of you who was not part of the group?
Don't step on my story.
I'm just checking. I just want to make sure. Go ahead. You do it.
Okay, so basically, there's a bunch of food, like like there's like mashed potatoes or or rice, and before you get to the meat, and you put the meat on at the end and you weigh it. The thing is, like, if you get all meat, it's a really high premium. If you get all vegetables, it's like $1 lower, and if you get some kind of mixture between the two, it's like $1 more. So the way that we approach the situation is like, let us get the lightest non-meat item that there is. So like let's get 2 leaves of lettuce that has high surface area, so it looks like we have a lot. But not so much weight, and then we put the meat on, and then we get the the highest reward, which seems like really stingy of us, but don't judge, please.
It is the gamification of the Brazilian food format. All right, that's just what it is.
This is our prep for game night, so no judgment, please. But there was this guy in front of us who was just put in a bunch of like mashed potatoes, starches, like heavy stuff, like beans, all this stuff on his plate before he even got to the meat. And Trey looks at me and he shakes his head. He goes like, that guy, he's just messing it up. He's just not doing the math. And and being who I am, I go like, obviously I understand what Trey's saying, and I, on one hand, I believe that, but on the other hand, I put myself in that guy's situation, and I look at our plates compared to his, and I go, if I were him, I'd look at us and go like, oh, these guys are so concerned about money. I feel bad for them. Like, they're going out to eat, and they're just trying to like, make it look like they have all this. Oh, they're trying to game the system. Like, this is dinner. Like, you're just supposed to enjoy your meal. Just, what does it matter if you pay an extra $5? If you have, and I was looking at that, I was like, oh, it's really 2 different ways of looking at the experience. And I imagine with people who are going to spend the $270, probably think of it in those terms. They're not thinking of it in terms of like, oh, how much juice can I squeeze out of this?
Right.
Because it's like, this is this moment. We're going to get together. We're going to spend, 9 hours and play this game maybe once with my closest friends. And it's going to be worth spending $300 to have this memory, this experience.
You keep going up. It was 170, by the way.
Okay, 170. Okay,
170.
So like, they're going to spend. It's totally fine to spend 570 on.
Okay, this is interesting though, because this is on the Facebook. Somebody posted a question, which is, "What's the most you ever did to bling out one of your games? What did you ever do most to upgrade it and bling it out?" And I did my facetious post, which is, well, for my copy of Antiquity, I took the chits out of the used Taco Bell wrappers that I usually store them in, and I put them in a plastic bag. One plastic bag. Because I notoriously don't really care about that stuff too much.
Sure.
But the truth behind it is that Maddie and I buy games differently.
Absolutely.
Like, he buys the deluxe. He loves the Kickstarter bonuses and the this and the that, and the big boxes and the blinged out stuff and all that sort of things. And I really don't want to spend that much money on things. And I think part of it comes from the fact that I've been, just having done it longer, I'm at a place now where I look at my collection and my purchase decisions come down to this. It's like, okay, this game looks like it fits in the space. Do I have any games that fit that kind of space? Yes, I do. Here are my 3 or 4 favorites that are in that space. Do I buy this game? And if I do, how do I justify adding that to my collection, right? How is that going to fit in there? And that's something that I think about a lot. And I don't need the bells and whistles, right? The game itself, how the game plays is the most important thing to me. Definitely not how it looks. That's not a really big concern for me. Listen, I love when a game looks beautiful. I absolutely adore it. But it's not the first, second, third, or even fourth thing that I'm concerned with. So for me, my game purchasing decisions have a lot more to do with, is this a game with I have a collection that I'm proud of and that I'm happy with, and when I walk into the room where the games are, everywhere I look is something I want to play, right? It's not hard to find a game to play on game night because there's all this great stuff. What I'm really looking for is there a game that I think has a high chance of staying in my collection? So that's a very different way of looking at it, right?
So what it sounds to me like, if I just reduced everything you said, is like, Paul, the reason why I don't spend $970 on a game like this is because I'm cheap.
Yes.
No, I totally get it, Tom. I totally get it.
Yeah, you play these games long enough, and you get to a point where, adding something new into your, I'm guessing for Jay Leno, it's, there are 1,000 new cars coming out every year. He's not getting many of them, right? Because he's got.
No, he seems to be an addict about cars.
Well, I guess that's true. That's a different.
But not to overdo this one thing, but when we were in Hawaii, not Hawaii, in Japan, we went to Jiro Sushi, which is as far as the main foodie culture, is probably premier sushi place in the world. It's arguably the best, right?
Yes.
And we paid a premium on that.
Beg your pardon?
I had to pay my share on that, for the sushi. You paid for the dessert restaurant, but
oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess fair enough. Fair enough. All right.
You love me, but you don't love me that much.
Hey, I got the reservation. That's virtually impossible.
Not judging. No judgment. I'm just saying, anyway. And there's this aspect about, you pick. People, I think you in particular are very conscious on how you spend your money, as far as is this going to be worth the squeeze? That's a very common, and ultimately I think there's a way of thinking, and that we as humans do. We go oh, and this doesn't fall into that calculus. We were going to spend that much money for the sushi. We would spend maybe 1.5 more than that for that sushi, just because it was the best in the world. And I think in this case, I think a lot of people will spend their money on games that really create this one feeling. Like I think I put myself in your shoes. Like I'm a person who really doesn't care about the blinged out stuff, and I enjoy just the company of it. But like for some people, that blinged out stuff is just as important as the company of it. And so I feel like this is I think the marketing of this game and the price point of this game is really business savvy because the people who are going to spend it are going to spend it. So, that's just how I see it. Like,
it's really interesting. What you just said is tremendously interesting to me because it definitely goes toward my philosophy of spending money and what we spend it on. There was a bunch of studies that were talking about money and happiness, right? And they kind of came to a semi-unanimous conclusion that money spent on experiences equals far more happiness than money spent on acquiring things.
But here's the thing, and I agree with that. But like, they're not buying the thing necessarily; they're buying the experience of playing a premium setup with their friends.
Yeah, I mean, but you understand that's a slippery slope there, right?
Oh,
that
absolutely.
Yeah, and the more you're focused on the things, the more you're paying money to acquire a thing, and the more you're focused on the experience of playing the game, the more you're on that. So you're right. Board games are this weird. They're kind of both a little bit, right? It's a matter of how much they are one or the other.
Well, I mean, like here's what I would say to you. Like, let's say this goes, and like because it's going to go, and
oh yeah,
and people get their play out of it, and it becomes this kind of like collector's item thing, and it shoots through the roof. As far as price point, like then was that a savvy move for them to do? Like as far as an investment to have, I don't know. I think like Jennifer and Matt do this really interesting thing where they buy games, and once they are done with the game, they sell them for it's like leasing a game, and so I don't know the answer. I'm just saying like there's a point to be made about buying the premium editions.
Sure.
That it's not it's not a sucker's bet. It's a choice.
No. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that it is a sucker's bet. What I am saying is that we need to be cognizant of these price points and realize that there are people that are listening to our podcast that $170 that's 4 other games.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the cost of 4 other games. And one of the things I like about the hobby is that the hobby doesn't have to be tremendously expensive, right? You can
absolutely 100%.
You can put together a collection of 10 games for $400 or so, and play those games for 5 years. Now, of course, we are a podcast where we keep telling you about the new hot game and this great game, and now we're doing this. We're going back to 2009 today to talk about this amazing game. It's just because the art form of board games has exploded and people are making amazing things out there. We want you to know what they are, but we also want to realize that, and we probably need to do an episode on this. We probably need to do an episode on budget gaming.
That's interesting. That'd be a good topic,
right?
Yeah,
Because I have a lot of sympathy for that. Listen, screenwriting is one of those things where you have amazing years and then you have some bad years sometimes. I mean, that's just the cyclical nature of the business, is that it's going to be that way. And having been on some down years, how do I budget my my gaming money? So anyway, which is all to say that Stellaris looks great. It is. There are going to be so many copies of this out there at 2.3 million. It is going to be all over the place. I definitely recommend you check it out. And if it is your jam and you know it's your jam, then plop down the money and check it out this week for sure.
Cool.
Let's do one last thing. We're going to talk about Keyforge Adventures. Keyforge, huge game that came out, deck building game, but it didn't have a cooperative mode. Maddie's going to be so upset. He's going to be so upset. He hates co-op. does not like co-op. But guess what? Keyforge Adventures is coming. And basically what it does is it turns Keyforge into two players playing cooperatively against a boss. The two that are coming out are Rise of the Keyraken instead of Kraken, and then the Abyssal Conspiracy. And the idea is it's a full-on adventure where you're playing against a common villain deck. Looks good. Looks like, I don't. Keyforge is not exactly my cup of tea to begin with, but I think it looks pretty good. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Marvel card game this way. When it's put together this way, a little bit.
Yeah, not the Dice Master one. Like which? Yeah, I see. Yeah, you're right. I forgot what it's called. Matt would know. He and I played a bit of that, I believe. But yeah, no, the artwork is great. If you like Keyforge, I think, and you like co-op, I think you would enjoy this. Or I've
Marvel
never played...
Champions, by the way. Marvel Champions, the card game.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, I wasn't the biggest fan of Keyforge. It was fine, but like as Trey and I were talking about this, I'm a big fan of deck construction.
Yeah,
and that's not what Keyforge is. And so, like,
I felt the same way. I felt like they had already done the thing that I find the most interesting part of the game.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
I totally agree with that.
But if you're into Keyforge and you like co-op, I think you should check this out.
Done.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.